They sat across from me in the glass conference room, my parents, my brother, and his wife. Their voices were softer now, nervous. My father's hands fidgeted with the paper cup of water, while my brother kept glancing at the company logo printed behind me, Echo North Media, my company. The same name he once called a little hobby. "Lena," my mother said carefully, "we wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious. Your father's business, it's just, we're drowning." I folded my hands on the table, feeling the smooth edge of the polished wood against my palms. The air conditioner hummed. It was strange, sitting across from the same people who once told me my degree was worthless, now asking for a 6-figure loan. My father tried to joke. "Guess your communications thing paid off, huh?" I smiled, not out of anger, but closure. "It did," I said quietly. "That's why we have an application process for funding requests." He frowned, confused. I slid the folder toward them. Standard paperwork, the same one any outside company would fill. "You'll need to go through our review board," I added. "We keep things professional here." My brother's wife exhaled, offended. "You're really going to make your own family apply?" I looked at them, all of them, and saw the disbelief, the panic, the sudden recognition of what I had built while they laughed. "I am," I said simply, "because family taught me what happens when you give without boundaries." And as their faces fell, I thought of the years that led here, the nights I studied by candlelight, the birthdays I spent alone, the phone calls that went unanswered. That's where this story really begins. They gave my brother a cake shaped like a hammer when he got into trade school. For me, they said, "Oh, communications? What do you even do with that?" I smiled that day. Quietly. Because if I didn't, I would have cried. My name is Lena Cross, and for most of my life I was the family's gentle disappointment. Polite, invisible, always trying to prove that being different didn't mean being less. Our family dinners were loud. My father talked over everyone. My mother served from the left. My brother made jokes about soft degrees, and I filled glasses of water just to stay useful. "You should have done something practical," my dad said once, slicing through a roast. "Like your brother, that's where the real money is." I nodded. Sure. But inside, I felt that quiet sting, the kind that doesn't show on your face but sits in your chest for years. I worked through college, taking night shifts at a diner, because my parents said they couldn't justify helping with tuition when I chose something so vague. They did, however, help my brother buy a used truck for his carpentry business. "He needs to start strong," Dad said. "You'll be fine. You're the book-smart one." I remember scrubbing coffee mugs at 1 a.m., my hands smelling like detergent and cinnamon syrup, whispering to myself, "I'll make this count." I don't know how yet, but I will. After graduation, I applied everywhere: marketing firms, small agencies, social media startups. I got rejection after rejection until one small firm in the city took me in as an unpaid intern. My mom said, "See? That's what happens when you pick something useless." Years passed. They didn't ask much about my work, just if I was still doing that online thing. Meanwhile, I learned everything: branding, negotiation, growth strategy, the invisible architecture of success that no one sees until it's too late. I built something out of nothing, one small contract at a time. By the time I was 29, I had a registered company, Echo North Media, with 4 employees, a handful of steady clients, and one major brand about to sign. I didn't tell my family much. They wouldn't have believed it. Then came that dinner. It was my mother's birthday. One of those events where cousins you barely know show up, and everyone pretends they've been close for years. I brought flowers and a small box of imported chocolates. My brother arrived with his fiancée and a brand new pickup. "Business is booming," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Some of us picked the right path. The table laughed. My mom touched his arm proudly. He's really worked hard, Lena. You could learn something from him. Consistency, you know? I nodded, smiling through the sting. Consistency, I thought. Like how you consistently forget my birthdays. When dessert came, my father raised his glass. To success. To real work. To the kind of effort that keeps this family proud. Everyone clinked glasses. I sipped my water. Later that night, as I helped clear the plates, my mom leaned over. You know, honey, it's never too late to go back to school. Maybe something more stable this time. Something you can explain at a party. I didn't say much. I just rinsed the plates and stared at the sink water turning cloudy. Sure, Mom, I said. Maybe one day. But deep down, I promised myself something. The next time they asked what I'd do, I'd make sure the answer couldn't be laughed at. When I finally left home, it wasn't a grand escape. I packed a single suitcase while everyone slept and took the 5 a.m. bus to the city, my diploma folded inside my coat. The seat beside me smelled like stale coffee and cigarette ash, and I stared out at the dawn-lit highway thinking, so this is what useless looks like. The next few years blurred into survival. I waited tables, graded essays for extra cash, and taught kids English in a cramped basement classroom that smelled like chalk and ambition. My degree didn't buy me luxury, it bought me perspective. Every rude customer, every rejection letter from big firms, every "we'll keep your resume on file" email hardened me into something sharper. And then one day, after a midnight tutoring session with a frustrated business student, I realized I could build something better than the companies that kept ignoring me. I started a small online consultancy, just me and my laptop. I called it Eden Strategies. The name felt ironic at first because nothing in my life was paradise, but it was mine. The business grew like ivy on old walls, slow, quiet, determined. My clients came through word of mouth, mostly people who couldn't afford large firms but needed someone to fix their marketing, write their pitches, or untangle their finances. I'd stay up past midnight with coffee gone cold, reworking business plans while rain tapped on the window. I never told my family. Not because I wanted revenge, yet, but because I didn't want their voices in my head again. That degree won't feed you. You should have done something practical. You think too much. Those words still echoed when I opened spreadsheets, like faint ghosts mocking me from the past. But success has its own sound, a quiet hum when numbers start to make sense, when invoices get paid, when your first employee calls you boss for the first time. By the third year, Eden had clients across 3 states. I'd learned how to negotiate contracts, how to read people's greed before they spoke, and how to keep calm when men tried to explain my own business to me. I moved into a small office downtown. The rent was ridiculous. But when I walked past the frosted glass door that said Eden Strategies, founder Lena Walsh, something in me straightened. I was no longer the one with the useless degree. I was the one who made something from nothing. It was a Thursday when my mother called for the first time in almost a year. Her voice was soft, rehearsed, almost guilty. "Hi, sweetheart, it's been a while." I knew that tone. It was the same one she used before asking me to clean up my brother's messes. "How's everyone?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "Well," she hesitated. "Things have been difficult. Your father's business partner pulled out of the construction project. We're short on capital." I stayed silent. The pause stretched until she filled it. "He said you started some kind of consulting company, right? Maybe you could take a look at the numbers, just help us get back on track?" And there it was, the full circle of irony. My useless degree, the one they mocked over dinners, was now their lifeline. I wanted to laugh, but instead I said, "Send me the files." That night, I opened the spreadsheet my brother had sent. It was a disaster. Unpaid taxes, inflated costs, missing funds. The numbers screamed arrogance and carelessness. My father's signature sat at the bottom of every page, confident and oblivious. For the first time, I didn't feel small reading his work. I felt powerful. Knowledge is its own quiet revenge. I stayed up until dawn analyzing every line, and when I found the hidden transactions to his personal expense account, I realized they weren't just struggling, they were sinking. The next morning, I drafted a full report. I sent it to them with no commentary, just data and recommendations. My father didn't call to thank me. Instead, he called to argue. "You're making us look incompetent," he barked. "I didn't make you anything," I said softly. "I just showed you what you already were." The silence that followed was long enough for me to hear my own heartbeat. That was the first time I realized power doesn't have to shout. It can whisper and still be heard. Months passed. Their business crumbled faster than my father's pride could rebuild it. My mother started calling more often, slipping guilt between her words like butter on toast. "You know, your brother's been having such a hard time," she'd say. "Maybe if you partnered with him?" "I'm running my own company now," I'd interrupt. "I don't have time for someone who still thinks I wasted my education." She'd sigh as if disappointed that I'd become cold. But truthfully, I'd just stopped volunteering for my own humiliation. A year later, when the construction firm officially filed for bankruptcy, my family's house, the same one where they laughed about my degree, was listed for sale. I read about it in the local newspaper. No one called to tell me. But karma doesn't send invitations. It just shows up when the timing's right. Then one afternoon, my assistant walked into my office holding a business card. "Someone's here to see you," she said. I looked up, and there he was, my brother. He looked thinner, older, like all the confidence had drained out of him. He smiled weakly. "Hey, sis, it's been a while." "It has," I said. "Have a seat." He sat across from me, fidgeting with his sleeve. "Listen, we're starting a new project, smaller scale, family thing. We could use your company's support, maybe an investment or some consulting help." I stared at him, searching for even a hint of humility. There was none, just entitlement dressed as desperation. I leaned back. "You remember when you said my degree was useless?" He laughed awkwardly. "Come on, that was years ago. We were kids." "No," I said quietly. "You were cruel." His face stiffened. "So is that a no?" I smiled. "It's a professional no, but I can recommend a few firms who might take you, if you can afford them." He left without shaking my hand, and when the elevator doors closed behind him, I sat for a long moment, staring at my reflection in the glass. I wasn't angry anymore. Just done. That night, I received a message from my mother. "You've changed. Success made you selfish." I stared at the words for a while, then typed back, "No. Neglect made me independent." And I never replied to another message from her again. But fate has a habit of looping back. A few months later, a major construction conglomerate approached me, ironically the same one that bought out the remnants of my father's old firm. They wanted Eden Strategies to consult on restructuring. I signed the contract without hesitation. When I walked into the new boardroom for our first meeting, the glass walls glimmered under morning light, and across the table sat my father, now just an advisor for the company that used to be his. He looked up, his eyes widening when he saw me. "Lena," he said, disbelief cracking his voice. I smiled professionally. "Good to see you again, Mr. Walsh." For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he leaned forward, whispering, "You did this?" "No," I said, calm as water. You did. That's the moment everything aligned. The years of dismissal, the mockery, the quiet grind. My degree hadn't been useless. It was the blueprint for this very moment. As I presented my strategy to the board, my father sat silently, realizing the balance had shifted forever. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I just let the truth speak louder than pride ever could. After that meeting, my world began to change in ways I couldn't have scripted. Word spread quickly in our industry. The daughter of a failed contractor had built the consulting firm that rescued his buyers. It was poetic, almost cruelly neat. But I didn't feed the gossip. I just kept working. I'd learned that silence unsettles people more than explanation ever could. My team grew from 5 to 20 in a year. We moved into a larger office, one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, the same city I used to walk through clutching resumes no one read. Now people came to me. CEOs, entrepreneurs, even professors wanted to feature me in interviews about women in leadership. I said no to most of them. Fame wasn't my goal, freedom was. Still, freedom has its own kind of noise. Every success brought back someone who once doubted me, wanting to rewrite their role in my story. Old classmates reached out on LinkedIn, pretending they always believed in me. Former teachers who'd rolled their eyes at my career choices now quoted me in their lectures. And then, there was my mother. Her calls became more frequent, her tone shifting between guilt and manipulation. "We're proud of you," she'd say. "You've really made something of yourself." I wanted to believe her, but pride without accountability always sounds hollow. She never mentioned the years they'd dismissed me. She never said sorry. She just wanted proximity to the version of me that now commanded respect. Then came the dinner invitation. My brother texted first. "Dad's birthday this weekend. Come by. He'd like to see you." For a long minute, I just stared at the message. The last time I'd seen my father, he'd been forced to call me Ms. Walsh in front of his new colleagues. Now he wanted to see me, privately. Against my better judgment, I went. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, just diminished. The yard was overgrown, the paint fading. My mother opened the door, her smile brittle but hopeful. "Lena," she said softly, "it's so good to have you home." I stepped inside, feeling the weight of 100 unspoken things pressing against the air. My father sat at the dining table, staring into a half-empty glass. He looked older, slower, his confidence stripped down to exhaustion. "Happy birthday," I said. He looked up, his eyes flicking between pride and shame. "You came." "Of course," I said politely. "It's family." Dinner was a performance, everyone pretending we hadn't built a wall between us. My mother asked about my company. My father nodded along. My brother avoided eye contact. The conversation felt like walking on broken glass. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "I've been thinking," he began. "You've built something impressive. Maybe it's time we work together, as a family again. I've still got connections, experience. You've got the modern know-how. We could—" I cut him off gently. "You want me to hire you?" He froze. "No, I'm saying, that's what this is," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You want a position in the company that started because you said I was wasting my life." The silence that followed was suffocating. My mother set down her fork. My brother shifted uncomfortably. "Lena," my father said quietly, "don't do this. We're trying to rebuild." I met his eyes. "I spent years trying to build your approval. I think I've done enough rebuilding for one lifetime." I stood to leave. My mother reached out, touching my wrist. "Honey, please, he's not well. We just want to be close again." I looked at her hand, soft, trembling, and I almost softened. Almost. Then be honest, I said. Say you're sorry for the way you treated me, for making me feel like my worth depended on your validation. She blinked, stunned. You know we love you. Love without respect is just control, I whispered. I walked out, my heels clicking against the old hardwood floors that had once echoed with their laughter at my expense. Outside, the night was cold and clear. I sat in my car for a long time, watching the porch light flicker, thinking about how forgiveness isn't always a door you open. Sometimes it's a window you close quietly. Weeks passed before I heard from them again. It came in the form of an email, from my brother this time. The subject line read, "Urgent, company proposal." I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. The message was long, desperate, full of plans for a new family business they wanted me to partner in. I could practically smell the panic between the lines. I forwarded it to my legal team and told them to decline, professionally, coldly, without emotion. That was the day I realized revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just chooses not to answer the call. Still, the universe wasn't done with its irony. A few months later, a high-profile government grant opportunity opened up, one that my company was shortlisted for. During the final evaluation, I noticed one of the competing firms' names on the list, Walsh Rebuild Co., my brother's new venture. My father listed as an advisor. I actually laughed out loud when I saw it. The very people who once mocked my education were now trying to compete with the woman they'd underestimated. The presentation day arrived. The conference hall was sleek, modern, with rows of chairs and flashing projectors. My team set up early, confident and professional. When my family walked in, I caught the flicker of recognition on my brother's face, the instant he realized I was their competition. He looked at me like he'd just seen a ghost from a version of life he thought he'd buried. My father didn't look at me at all. The moderator called my name. I walked to the podium, heels clicking in a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't crack. Years of being silenced had taught me how to speak with precision. Our mission at Eden Strategies, I began, is to build systems that last longer than pride and stronger than legacy. I saw my father flinch. When I finished, the applause was polite but solid. Then it was their turn. My brother stumbled through his presentation, reading off slides he barely understood. My father tried to interject, but the panel cut him off. It was painful to watch, not because I pitied them, but because I recognized that hollow desperation. It was the same one I once felt begging for their approval. When the results came, Eden Strategies won the contract. The margin wasn't close. I stood there accepting the handshake from the grant committee, my family watching from the audience. My brother avoided my eyes. My father looked like he wanted to disappear. Later that night, I went home to my quiet apartment. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window, the city lights shimmering below. For the first time, I didn't feel triumph. I felt peace. Because real revenge isn't about making them suffer. It's about no longer needing them to see your worth. Still, when I got a text from my mother the next day that said, "We're proud of you, Lena. Maybe now you understand what family means," I just smiled and deleted it. Because she was right in a way. I did understand what family meant. I understood it could break you, teach you, and still not deserve you. When the news broke that Eden Strategies had secured the government contract, it spread faster than I expected. Articles popped up across local outlets. Young CEO outshines legacy builders. New consulting firm beats veteran competitors. I didn't plan the attention. I never do, but the timing couldn't have been more ironic. I knew my father would see those headlines over his morning coffee. I also knew my mother would print them out, pretending to be proud, secretly calculating how to use them in her next social conversation. But what I didn't expect was the ripple effect. Within weeks, vendors who used to work with my father's company began reaching out to me for contracts. Clients he once mocked me for pursuing were now calling my office, asking for consultations, shifting their loyalty quietly but completely. I didn't sabotage him, I didn't have to. His arrogance had done that for me years ago. Still, the collapse came faster than even I predicted. One afternoon, my assistant buzzed in and said softly, "There's someone here to see you. He says it's personal." I looked up, and through the frosted glass of my office door, I saw the faint outline of a familiar posture. Slumped shoulders, weathered hands clutching a folder. My father. He looked smaller than I remembered, as if the weight of his pride had finally caved in on itself. "Lena," he said quietly when I opened the door, "I need a few minutes." I gestured toward the chair across from me. "You have 3. He hesitated, then sat. He didn't look around the office, at the polished wood, the awards, the framed degree he once called worthless. He just held out the folder, his fingers trembling. "We're in trouble. The business is failing. Your brother, he tried to save it, but the debts..." He trailed off, eyes glistening. "The bank's coming after the house." I said nothing. I wanted to feel something. Anger, pity, justice. But I felt empty. Like the version of me that needed this moment had already healed and moved on. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked finally. He swallowed hard. "You could help. Alone, maybe. You have the resources. I'll pay it back, I swear." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "The same way you paid back my faith in you?" He looked up sharply, hurt flashing across his face. "You don't understand. This is family." "I understand perfectly," I said softly. "Family is supposed to protect each other, not use each other until it's convenient." He exhaled shakily. "Lena, please. Don't make me beg." But he already was. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the skyline that had watched me grow up in silence. "Dad, do you remember what you said when I told you I got into the university program?" He frowned, confused. "That was years ago. You said, 'Good luck paying off that useless degree.'" I turned to face him. Well, it paid off, and so did I. He sat there, shoulders heavy, the silence stretching between us like glass. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. "You're really not going to help us?" I shook my head slowly. "I don't fund lessons people refuse to learn." He left without another word. I watched him walk down the hall, his figure shrinking with every step, until the elevator doors closed and he was gone. That night, I didn't celebrate. I didn't even tell anyone. I went home, poured tea instead of wine, and sat in the dark. The thing about revenge, the quiet kind, is that it doesn't taste sweet. It tastes like closure. And closure is flavorless, but life, as it tends to, had another twist waiting. 2 weeks later, my company was invited to a televised business forum, a roundtable discussion on sustainable growth and legacy. I almost declined until I saw the guest list. One of the panelists, my brother, representing Walsh Rebuild Co. Apparently, they were still trying to stay relevant through publicity. I said yes. The studio was cold, bright, and sterile. The kind of place where truth gets dressed up in talking points. I wore a soft gray suit, understated but strong. When my brother walked in, his face drained of color. He approached me awkwardly before we went live. "Lena, listen," he murmured. "Let's keep this professional, okay? We're here to promote our work, not whatever this is." I gave him a small smile. Of course. Strictly business. The cameras rolled. The host introduced us, asked about innovation, sustainability, leadership. My brother recited rehearsed lines about family-driven businesses, while I spoke about adaptability and ethics, about how true legacy isn't inherited, it's built. At one point, the host turned to me and asked, "Ms. Walsh, you mentioned earlier that your firm was self-funded. Was that difficult coming from a business family?" I paused, knowing the audience's eyes and my brother's were on me. "Actually," I said calmly, "my degree was considered useless. My ideas were dismissed. But I learned that independence built from rejection is stronger than any hand-me-down empire." There was a subtle shift in the room, a collective inhale. My brother's jaw tightened. He tried to smile, but the cameras caught everything. The host moved on, but the damage was done. Within hours, that clip was trending online. CEO throws shade at family on live TV was one of the headlines. I didn't plan that moment. It just happened. The truth has a way of finding its stage. In the weeks that followed, my brother's company finally folded. Creditors stepped in. The house I grew up in was listed for sale. My mother called once, crying. I didn't pick up. Instead, I sent a check to the real estate agency anonymously. Enough to cover the debts so they wouldn't lose everything. But never enough for them to know it came from me, because real revenge isn't cruelty. It's control. It's knowing you could destroy someone and choosing not to. And yet, even with everything I'd built, everything I'd survived, I still sometimes dreamed of that little girl at the kitchen table, showing her report card to parents who never looked up. She was still in there somewhere, wanting to be seen. That's the cruelest truth about success after betrayal. You can outgrow the pain, but you never forget the sound of it. It was a Sunday when she showed up. I'd been working late all week, trying to close another partnership deal, and I'd promised myself a quiet day. No emails, no phone calls, just the soft hum of rain against the window. But when the intercom buzzed, I knew before I even looked who it was. My mother. Her voice was small through the speaker. Lena, I know you probably don't want to see me, but please, just a few minutes. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the door. The woman who had once called my education a phase, who had laughed when I couldn't afford rent during grad school, was now standing in my lobby asking for time. I almost told the concierge to turn her away. But something in her tone, not desperation, not manipulation, just weariness, made me press the button. When the elevator opened, she stepped out carefully, holding a grocery bag like it was an offering. She looked smaller than I remembered, her hair streaked with more gray than I'd last seen. Her eyes darted around my apartment, the clean lines, the quiet order, before settling on me. You look good, she said softly. So do you, I replied, though it wasn't true. She nodded, then placed the grocery bag on the counter. I brought your favorite tea, the one you used to drink when you studied late. I stared at it. You mean the one you said smelled like dirt? Her shoulders sagged. I said a lot of things I shouldn't have. We stood in silence. The rain filled the spaces between us. Finally, she spoke again. Your father isn't well. The stress? It's taken a toll. He's different now, quieter. He regrets things. I crossed my arms. Regret is easy when the damage is done. She looked up at me with tears she didn't bother to hide. Lena, please. He's proud of you, even if he'll never say it the way you need to hear it. We both are. I felt something twist in my chest, not forgiveness, but fatigue. The kind that comes from holding anger too long. You know, I said quietly, for years I wanted to hear that. I wanted you to see me. But I don't need it anymore. She took a small step forward. Then why do I still feel like I failed you? Her voice broke on that word, failed. And for the first time, I saw not the mother who dismissed me, but the woman who didn't know how to be anything else. She'd been raised to believe that love was conditional, that value came from work you could touch with your hands. My degree, my career, it all existed in a world she didn't understand. Maybe she hadn't hated it. Maybe she'd just feared it, I exhaled. You didn't fail me. You just stopped seeing me when I didn't fit the version of family you believed in. She nodded slowly, tears falling onto her hands. We were wrong. We sat down at the table. For a long time, neither of us spoke. She poured the tea, the same way she used to when I was a teenager, though her hands trembled more now. The smell of jasmine filled the air, soft, earthy, familiar. After a few sips, she reached into her purse and slid an envelope across the table. It's the deed to the house, she said. Your father wanted to sell it. I couldn't let it go without telling you first. It's still your home, you know. If you ever want it, I looked at the envelope but didn't touch it. That house isn't home anymore. It's just a building full of echoes. Her lips quivered. Then what do you want from us, Lena? What do you need? I smiled faintly. Nothing. That's the point. She covered her face and sobbed quietly. I sat there, calm, still. Not cruel, just done. After a while, I stood. You should get going before the rain gets worse. She wiped her eyes, nodded, and gathered her things. At the door, she turned one last time. I'm sorry for everything. I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman who once couldn't see past her husband's pride, now breaking under her own guilt. I know, I said. That's enough. When the door closed, I sank onto the couch, listening to the rain again. My apartment felt different, lighter somehow. I realized that peace doesn't always come from victory. Sometimes it comes from finally letting go of the need to prove you've already won. Later that night, I opened my laptop and clicked on an email draft I'd been avoiding. It was from a mentorship program at the university I'd graduated from, asking if I'd consider speaking to students about resilience and failure. I typed a simple reply. Yes, because that was the real end of it. Not in boardrooms or business deals, but in giving meaning to what I'd endured. The morning after the meeting, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, staring at the same sunlit counter I once used to study on. The silence in my house felt different now. Not empty, but earned. For years I thought peace would come with applause or recognition, but instead it came wrapped in quiet, in the sound of nothing left to prove. My phone buzzed again. Another message from my mother. We didn't mean what we said back then. You know we're proud of you. Can you please talk to your father? I read it twice, not out of shock, but because my hands didn't tremble anymore. I deleted it. That was new for me. I used to reread every word they said, looking for love hidden between the lines. But I'd learned that some people only speak love when they need something from you. I opened my laptop, and for a moment, I saw the reflection of my younger self in the black screen. The girl who sat at family dinners pretending the jokes didn't sting, who smiled while being called the dreamer, who worked late at the library while her brother got praised for fixing cars. I wanted to reach through that reflection and tell her that one day they'd walk into her office, not to belittle her, but to beg her. I thought of the look in my father's eyes yesterday. There wasn't anger there. Not really. It was confusion. The kind a man has when the world stops revolving around him and he can't figure out when it happened. My mother's silence had been heavier. She didn't cry, but I could see the flicker of something that looked like shame. My brother just stared at his hands. The same hands that used to pat my shoulder at Christmas and say, "At least you tried, sis." And me? I didn't feel victorious. I felt still. Maybe that's what revenge really is. Not destruction, but balance. Not fire, but peace. That night, I walked into my study, the one with the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city. The skyline pulsed with light, blue, white, gold, like quiet promises. I opened the folder on my desk labeled Family Holdings, Proposed Loan, the same proposal my father had asked me to sign. I flipped to the last page and stared at the numbers. $1.2 million. Enough to save their construction business. Enough to remind me of every birthday they forgot, every graduation they minimized, every sacrifice they mocked. I signed the paper, but not in the way they expected. Instead of approving the loan, I transferred a modest amount, just enough to keep their employees paid for another month. Along with it, I attached a simple note. For the workers who depend on you. Not for you, Lena. Then I closed the file. It wasn't spite. It was closure, because I realized something while they were sitting across from me yesterday. I didn't want them to fall. I just didn't want to be the one they stood on anymore. I leaned back in my chair, letting the city noise fill the room. Car horns, the faint hum of life. I used to think success would sound like applause, but it sounded like this instead. The world moving on, quietly, after you stop chasing approval. Later, I found an old box in my closet. Inside were my college notebooks, the ones filled with sketches of business models, late-night scribbles, and taped coffee receipts from nights I couldn't afford real meals. I ran my hand across the pages, tracing the girl I used to be. I remembered one of my professors telling me, "The world won't understand you until they need you." At the time, it sounded like comfort. Now, it felt like prophecy. I pulled out one page, a doodle of a company name I'd once dreamed of starting, Aurora Strategies. It was a mix of hope and irony, named after the light that comes after the darkest night. That's what I'd called it back then, not realizing it would become the company my family would someday kneel to. My phone rang again. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to pick up. It was Daniel, one of my dad's old employees. "Miss Carter," he said softly. "I just wanted to say thank you. Everyone at the site is relieved. You saved a lot of families today." I smiled faintly. "They deserve stability," I said. "Even if my family doesn't." When I hung up, I realized my revenge hadn't been in denying my father money. It was in protecting the people he'd failed to. That was my full circle. I didn't need to prove anything to them. I just needed to prove something to myself, that I could be powerful and kind at the same time. The next weekend, I drove back to my parents' old house, not to see them, but to see the oak tree in the front yard. It was the one I used to sit under as a child, reading, while my brother washed his car and my dad called him the future. The tree looked smaller now, or maybe I'd just grown. I stood there for a while, letting the wind brush my face, thinking about all the times I'd wished to be seen. As I turned to leave, I saw my mother standing on the porch. She didn't wave. Neither did I. But our eyes met, and for the first time, I didn't see her as the woman who failed to defend me. I saw her as someone trapped in her own limits, shaped by a world that told her daughters should shrink. I had simply stopped shrinking. I got in my car, rolled down the window and let the cold air in. Driving away, I thought of the first time they told me my degree was useless, or how I'd laughed it off, pretending it didn't hurt. How I'd stayed quiet because I thought silence meant strength. But silence is only strength when it's a choice. Now it was. Back at my apartment, the evening light spilled across the floor like melted gold. I brewed another cup of tea, the same brand I drank in college. I held the cup close and whispered, mostly to myself, "They said my degree was useless." I paused, smiling slightly. "But it built a world they can't enter without me." The kettle clicked off. Steam curled into the quiet air. Somewhere outside, the city buzzed, unaware of the small, poetic victory unfolding in one apartment window. I took a slow sip and closed my eyes. Peace didn't taste like revenge. It tasted like clarity. And for the first time in years, I finally felt free.